Thanks so much for being here. It really means a lot. And I hope you'll find this engaging and maybe enlightening, but I must warn you, it won't be brief. We're scheduled for 2 hours. We won't go 2 hours, but we are dealing with subject matter so essential, so vital to what it means, I think, partly to lead a good life, but partly simply to live. I mean really live, that it's worth spending some time contemplating the book and some of the ideas it contains. And of course, Leo Tolstoy's novel Anna Karenina, published in the 1870s, could be thought of as a multi-layer cake. We can't begin to encompass it tonight. We won't even be dealing with a reasonably sized slice. We'll really only cover a sliver of the text. But it is such a rich and illuminating text that even if we could begin to plumb the depths of a sliver or two, we might discover some things that could prove transformative in our lives. And that's the spirit in which I offer this talk tonight, called Gratitude in the Greatest Novel. You might not agree with this, but I believe it to be true. I think the quality of our lives, and as I said before, the degree to which we are alive, hinges in part on the ideas with which we live. If we're living with poor ideas, that will take an adverse impact on our lives. On the other hand, if we're living with really good ideas, real touchstones for what it means to be human and to live a good human life, then we're really blessed. And I think Anna Karenina is a book that is chock full of good ideas. It's not a work of theology or philosophy, it's a work of literature, but it's an incredibly rich text. If you were moved by this presentation tonight to begin reading it, warning, it's about 800 pages in English translation. And, it's set in 19th century Russia, so much of it seems foreign to us, but I think it speaks to universal and timeless human themes. It is really not about 19th century Russia. It's what it means to be human in ancient Athens or ancient Jerusalem, or today in cities like New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, and maybe even Zionsville, Indiana. So whether this proves that to you remains to be seen, but it's an idea that I hope you embark on this journey with me in mind. What's this? My wife and I just hung this image directly across from the front door. If you visit our house and the front door opens, you'll see a smiling face welcoming you, but behind that smiling face, you'll see this image. What is it? Well, it was created by the artist Salvador Dali, who was commissioned to create paintings to accompany a new Latin edition of the Bible. And this depicts what scene? It's the bush that did not burn. So in the foreground in red, you can see the figure of Moses, and higher up in the background, you can see a bush which is burning but is not consumed by the flames. And I want to read a passage from the text that speaks to this image. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Biblical texts are incredibly rich and complex and can be viewed from many different perspectives. But what strikes me about this passage is when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look. What do you and I lead our lives looking at? And at what pace do we move from thing to thing? I have the sense that it might be possible that Moses is remarkable because he had the patience to watch that burning bush long enough to realize that it wasn't being consumed. In other words, he lingered at the site long enough to notice something no one else had. I'm worried that you and I are leading our lives at too fast a pace. And sometimes we're so distracted by things that aren't really worthy of our gaze that we're missing, failing to notice, to attend to some things that really matter a great deal. So this is something I want to caution you about. Anybody recognize the context of this image? What is this? Well, this is Oprah's book club. Oprah's book club named Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina one of its books. And I think that's a good thing. But I'm very disturbed by the way Oprah's book club tried to draw attention to the text. They said Anna Karenina is an extremely sexy and engrossing read. This book tells the tale of one of the most enthralling love stories in the history of literature. It truly was the Harlequin romance of its day. Maybe that's true, but maybe that's not true. Maybe if you approach life or the text Anna Karenina expecting a Harlequin romance, that's exactly what you're going to find. So part of the purpose of this talk is to just suggest that Leo Tolstoy wants to turn our heads, open our eyes, and get us to look at life with new eyes, with our eyes opened for the very first time. So next slide. And this is a list from Time magazine in the early 2000s. 225 living poets and authors were polled. What are the greatest books of imaginative literature in human history? As you can see, only one author has 2 in the top 10. That's Leo Tolstoy. And at number 3 is War and Peace, which is even longer than Anna Karenina, although very worthy of our attention. But the number 1 novel is Anna Karenina, so it's at least plausible that we'll be talking tonight about the greatest novel that's available to us. There's simply no better work of imaginative literature to which we could direct our attention than Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. And this is the epigraph of Anna Karenina. So you open the cover, go past the title page. This is the epigraph, both from the Old and New Testament. Vengeance is mine, I will repay. Why did Tolstoy choose that as the epigraph? Well, I have a theory which could be wrong. Part of it might be that only God can exact justice. Part of it might be that we can't really understand the things we presume to judge. The Bible is full of human choices that don't emerge fully except in the fullness of time. Sometimes it's generations later that we find out what a choice meant. That perhaps we lack the comprehensive understanding, the God's eye view one would need to understand what any human choice means in the fullness of time. And in fact, I want you to know that the word translated here, vengeance, could be translated as vindication. Not that God reserves vengeance, but God reserves vindication. In essence, exonerating somebody potentially. So the message might be in part, don't condemn but forgive, and not to turn to resentment. Some people here this evening might be seething over the election result. Maybe other people are rejoicing. I don't know. But the idea is that there's a whole lot more in life to feel grateful for and a whole lot less in life that we should spend our time resenting, seething over, boiling over in anger. So here we go. We embark on a kind of adventure, a literary adventure. My intention is to talk about only 2 scenes in a huge book, to talk about only 2 scenes. One is a scene involving a man. His name is Konstantin Levin. Some of you will know that Leo, as in Leo Tolstoy, in Russian is Lev. And there's good reason to think that Tolstoy saw himself in this character named Levin. In fact, it's said that his wife Sophia Tolstoy, by the way, who bore her husband 13 children and copied out the manuscript of War and Peace 7 times by hand. Sophia turned to her husband Lev, Leo Tolstoy, and said, "Levin is you without the talent." Levin can never get his book written. Tolstoy had no trouble getting things written. But so this scene of Levin mowing may have something of Tolstoy himself in it, and that's worth bearing in mind. So this is the most boring thing in the world. Somebody's going to go out and mow the hay. What could be less interesting than that? What could be less illuminating than somebody out in a field mowing hay? You know, we want to learn about people who go to the shrines in Athens or Jerusalem, people who scale the mountaintops, right? And interrogate the wise man who's seated on top. But in point of fact, I think Leo Tolstoy wants to suggest that ordinary human activities, including something so seemingly mundane as mowing, might in fact signify something much deeper if only we had the time and the patience to attend to it. By the way, this is not a Van Gogh image, but it's an image inspired by Vincent van Gogh, the mower. Van Gogh created images very much like this, but this isn't one he created. So I'll read you a little bit of background. Levin had been very angry with the steward, the foreman, who was keeping track of the peasants' work on the farm. He was really upset, and he knew himself well enough. You know, if you go to consult the oracle at Delphi in ancient Greece, which you would do if you were thinking about getting married or marching your troops into battle, you would go consult the oracle, and as you did so, you would walk under an archway that had 2 Greek words on it: know yourself. So Levin knows himself enough to know that work can calm him. When he's upset, one of the best things he can do is work, in particular, kind of demanding physical labor. So he'd been planning to mow with the peasants for months. His brother is a public intellectual. He's like a columnist for the New York Times or the Washington Post, or who knows, the Indianapolis Star. I don't know, but his brother thinks Levin is crazy. You're not a peasant. You don't have to go out and mow the hay. His brother's surprised that Levin would want to go spend the whole day on an equal footing with the peasants. Who in their right mind would do that? Thinks his brother, the intellectual. But Levin, once he gets out there, thinks of nothing and desires nothing other than not to fall behind. The peasants have a lot of experience. He, not so much. So when he gets out there, he has to keep telling himself, this isn't about me. This isn't about me. I think that's one of the most important incantations we can recite to ourselves. This isn't about me. This is about something bigger that I'm a part of, but it's not really about me. So, Levin has learned that work can be a way to dissipate anger, that work can in fact bring us together, that the rich landowner, Levin, and his peasants can come together in shared labor, in this case mowing the hay, and that work can give us an opportunity to become one with something beyond ourselves. I bet you've experienced that. Maybe grudgingly taken on a volunteer assignment, but in the course of doing the work with strangers, you somehow don't mind it so much anymore, and maybe feel you've developed a new relationship with somebody you otherwise never would have met. So this is the last before I start quoting from Tolstoy, but Levin loses all awareness of time. There's a famous academic from my alma mater, the University of Chicago, with the ungainly name Mike Csikszentmihalyi. Mike Csikszentmihalyi studies flow. Maybe it's performing music, maybe it's dancing, maybe it's a dinner conversation with your sweetheart, but there are times in life when we become so absorbed, so much a part of what we're doing, that we lose track of time, maybe even in a sense forget ourselves. So this happens to Levin. A change is coming about in his work that gives him tremendous joy. Where do you find tremendous joy? When was the last time you experienced tremendous joy? Was it today? Yesterday? Last week? A month ago? Last year? I'm not sure I've ever experienced tremendous joy. What does that even mean? Well, what if tremendous joy is available to us in life? It at least can come to us if we can't grasp it and clutch it to our chests. What if it's there, and to unlock it, to reveal it, what we have to do is see life clearly, truly, and lovingly. So there were moments when he forgot what he was doing and it became easy for him. His rows, as he's mowing, are nearly perfect. But as soon as he remembered what he was doing and started trying to do better, he immediately felt just how difficult it was, and his row came out badly. What if our self-consciousness is one of our biggest barriers in performing at our best and finding joy in what we do? So Tolstoy writes, "The scythe cut by itself. Even more joyous were the moments when, as they neared the stream where the rows ended, the old man." There's this character in this scene known only as the old man. We never find out his name. He's an anonymous peasant, a nobody. He has very little property. He holds no office. His name is not widely known even in his own neighborhood, let alone throughout Russia. But he's in fact one of the most significant characters in the entire book, this old man. The old man wiped his scythe with thick wet grass, rinsed its steel in fresh steam water, dipped his tin cup, and offered some to Levin. He dips his cup into the stream and he offers it to Levin. Now maybe he does that because Levin's his boss, but maybe we're witnessing a human possibility where we cease to be masters and servants, or bosses and workers, where it's possible for us to be on an equal footing and in a different kind of relationship that doesn't involve superiority and inferiority. So anyway, you could see here the possibility that Levin glimpses eternity. Next slide, please. Sorry. Have you ever glimpsed eternity? Have you ever known what it's like to be in a kind of timeless state where you're no longer aware of what went before and what's coming after? You're so immersed in what's happening right now. A kind of total presence. I'm not thinking about the 10 things on my to-do list. I'm not thinking about how I feel about the recent elections. I'm not thinking about the dishes that need to be done or the trash that needs to be taken out. I am totally present in this activity at this moment. Could that be a kind of blessing? To know what it's like to be totally present, not to be displaced, not to be thinking about what comes after or what went before, but simply here. Maybe there's a kind of self-forgetting in that, and maybe that can teach us something about the circumstances where gratitude can come to us. Possibility number one, I hate my life. I resent my life. I feel cheated because I should have achieved a certain level of wealth, a certain position on the organization chart. That should be my image on the cover of that magazine, and I am boiling with resentment. I envy everybody who's surpassed me. Could be. But maybe there's another way to look at life, namely with a sense of gratitude. You know, far more has come to me in this life than I ever could have possibly deserved. And the big challenge for me is not to grasp and hang on to even more, but simply to feel truly grateful, maybe even to celebrate what's come our way already. So now we're quoting from Tolstoy directly, and this, remember, the old man hands Levin a tin cup with stream water in it. How much did that cost? Nothing. How much is that cup worth? I guess nothing, right? It's worthless because it's free. Free things are worthless. I guess they don't amount to much, or not. Levin had never drunk a beverage like this warm water with the floating bits of greenery and the rusty taste from the tin cup. The longer Levin mowed, the more often he felt these moments of oblivion when it wasn't his arm swinging the scythe, but the scythe itself bringing along his body, which was fully aware of itself and full of life. And as if by magic, without him thinking about it, correct and precise work performed itself. These were the most blissful moments of all. Maybe you've had a moment like that playing the piano, or on the dance floor, or on the basketball court, or at the bridge table, where you forgot yourself, where you were totally immersed in what was happening, and you found a kind of bliss in that. Or as I would prefer to say, maybe a kind of bliss came to you in that kind of activity. So I think one of the messages of Tolstoy that we very much need to consider is that we're not going to be saved, our lives aren't going to be redeemed by what we own, by who we control, by how many people recognize us by face. Maybe there's something far worthier of our attention in life. And ironically, maybe that's some of the most ordinary things in life. The simple fulfillment of a purpose. You know, maybe you mow your own lawn, or maybe you tend your own flower beds. Well, that's a nothing, right? Just an idle pastime. Doesn't produce any income. You're not winning any gardening awards. Why are you wasting your time on that? Well, that might be a question couched in tremendous ignorance. Somebody who doesn't really understand what counts, what really counts in life. Maybe there's joy in participating even in ordinary activities. So Tolstoy again. By the way, I say again, perhaps the greatest novelist ever to put pen to paper. Anna Karenina came out #1. Maybe it's the greatest novel ever written. Why do people think it's so great? Why would Tolstoy have a long scene about a guy mowing hay? Well, maybe it's because we forgot what it means to mow hay or to be engaged in ordinary activities, and we need a refresher, a reminder of what really counts. It was only hard when he had to halt this now unconscious movement and think about how he should mow around a hummock or unweeded sorrel. The old man did this easily. Who is this old man? What does he know that we don't know, or at least that Levin doesn't know? The old man does this easily. As a hummock approached, he would alter his motion and using either his heel or the end of his scythe, crop the hummock on either side with short strokes. He just takes it in stride, without breaking his rhythm, because he understands so well what he's doing that he doesn't even have to think about it. He's no longer absorbed with the mechanics of fingers striking keys. He has made that so much a part of what he is that he can now focus entirely on interpreting the piece. The mechanics come as naturally as walking. As he did this, he was constantly examining and observing what was coming up ahead. Or else he was picking a stalk of sorrel, eating it, or offering it to leaven. Or else he was flinging a twig aside with the help of his scythe, or examining a quail's nest after the hen had flown out right from under the scythe, or catching a viper that had landed in his path, and lifting it with his scythe as if on a fork, he would show leaven and toss it aside. This guy is not only the best mower in the field, as effortless as anybody. He's a small guy, a scrawny guy. Levin's a big, well-fed guy who has time to exercise and build his muscles. But this scrawny little guy is one with the scythe. And so he doesn't have to think about moving the scythe, so he can reveal things. He shows Levin things Levin is missing, like that quail's nest. What a marvelous thing to be somebody who through work is able to show other people what's most worth noticing. Wonders that might otherwise completely escape our gaze. I see this all the time in medicine. We are so caught up with, the monitors at the bedside, telemetry, what's the patient's pulse, the patient's blood pressure, what are the arterial blood gases, and so on. We get so caught up with all that that sometimes we don't even really see the patient. We treat the patient like a specimen, like a machine that we're adjusting, dials and levers and so forth. This guy sees what's really there. And Levin is learning something profound from him. What do you do in life that might reveal something profound to the rest of us? You don't have to write best-selling novels, prize-winning musical compositions or stage productions. It might be something as simple as cooking or hosting a meal or maybe even cuddling a baby. It might be something as simple and universal as that. But the notion is that there's a wonder in that most of us entirely overlook. And that's precisely what I think Tolstoy wants to draw our attention to. So this unnamed old man, this nobody who never amounted to anything in life, he won't even get a line in an obit in a local newspaper. Here and gone, nobody noticed. But this is somebody who knows what's worth noticing. And this is somebody who shares what he's discovered, what he knows to be most worth noticing. So he's engaged not only in discovery, but revelation. What could you reveal to the rest of us? Could you be generous to the rest of us? Could you help us be more grateful for the things in life that matter the most by exhibiting generosity? I would suggest this old man is doing exactly that. He's showing Levin what it's like to be one with the work to such an extent that you can discover things that nobody else notices and share them with others. He's teaching us how to see. Now you would say, oh, well, we all know how to see. I mean, maybe we need corrective lenses, or have our cataracts removed or, what have you. We all know how to see. To be human is to be able to see. What if that's not true? What if seeing, really seeing clearly, truly, and lovingly requires real discipline over a long period of time? It's not, what should I do or what should I avoid doing? It's, do I see what's really before me? This human being, what's on this human being's heart, how I might be of service to this human being. Maybe that's the big challenge, not just to distinguish right from wrong. So Levin didn't notice the time passed. Had he been asked how long he'd been mowing, he would have said half an hour. but it's approaching dinner time. As he started down a row, the old man drew Levin's attention. See, Levin wouldn't have seen this, but the old man sees it, and he points it out to Levin. The little girls and boys, barely visible, coming toward the mowers from different directions through the tall grass and along the road, carrying bundles of bread that dragged down their little arms and pitchers of kvass stoppered with rags. Levin sat down with them. He didn't feel like leaving. These little children are bringing cheap beer and bread, bundles of bread. You know, it's hard for them to carry them, but they are the ones bringing sustenance to these men laboring in the field. You know, what might little children bring to us if only we had our eyes open and could see what they really bear in their very being, their very presence. So again, something timeless about this, the notion of children bearing sustenance. What if children have something we desperately need? They somehow see things in a way many of us have forgotten how to see. And if we could look at the world again through their eyes, you know, maybe having children or having grandchildren or nieces and nephews is in fact one of our best hopes for redemption in life. Because if only we can open our eyes and our ears and our minds and our hearts long enough, we can see life through their eyes and appreciate how much around us is truly wonderful and truly a cause for thanksgiving or gratitude, which of course is our theme today. So normally the peasants would be a little awkward around their master, so to speak, their landowner. Not here. Any embarrassment in front of the master had evaporated long before. The peasants were getting ready for dinner. Some were washing. The young men were bathing in the stream. Others were setting up a place to rest, untying their bundles of bread and unstoppering their pitchers of kvass. The old man crumbled some bread in his mug, crushed it with the handle of his spoon, added water from the dipper, broke up some more bread, and after sprinkling it with salt, said a prayer facing east. "Here you go, master. Try some of my turkey," he said, leaning on his knees in front of his mug. This man has nothing. A tin cup, some bread, some water, some very cheap beer. He has the most meager provisions to offer, and probably barely enough for himself, but he is preparing a true feast for Levin. You know, this is a literary depiction of communion, the likes of which we rarely encounter, at least that I've rarely encountered in my own reading. So the peasant exhibits a kind of humility. He's not pretending to be something he's not. He's got almost nothing. But he's not letting that stand in the way. He's being as generous as he possibly can. I remember going with a son to Sudan. A woman found out that we were going to be coming to visit her, so she lived in a dirt floor hut. She had next to nothing. But when she found out we were coming to visit, you know, there she was with her broom, cleaning the place up as best she could. And although the provisions were meager, she showed us a kind of hospitality that our richest and most powerful and famous hosts never quite equaled. You know, it was because of what was in her heart, not what she could afford to put on a plate. So who's the real master here? Well, Levin is by name the master, but I would suggest to you that this old man is in fact the master, because he has discovered something essential about life that Levin and we can learn from. The churka, that churka, by the way, is a Russian word that means sop or sopped or sopping. You know, you might dip your bread in the gravy. You know, that's what that means. The turkey was so tasty that Levin changed his mind about going home for dinner. He's got a magnificent repast at home with his brother, the intellectual. Why would he stay with these people for dinner? He ate with the old man and got to talking with him about his domestic affairs, taking the liveliest interest in them, and informed him about all his affairs and all the circumstances that might interest the old man. He felt closer to him, this unnamed old man, than to his brother, and couldn't help but smile at the affection he felt for this man. When the old man stood up again, said a prayer, and lay down right there under the bush, putting some grass down for a headrest, Levin did the same. And in spite of the sticky flies so obstinate in the sun and the bugs tickling his sweaty face and body, he fell asleep instantly. Some people have trouble sleeping. In this environment, this circumstance, Levin has no difficulty sleeping. He falls asleep instantly and did not wake up until the sun had crossed to the other side of the bush and reached him. The old man had been awake for a long time and was sitting sharpening the young boy's size. Levin looked around and did not recognize the place. So much had everything changed. An innocuous little sentence, but I think that sentence, in fact, packs something really extraordinary. When Levin woke up, he didn't recognize the place. So much had everything changed, although, of course, we know that the place hadn't really changed very much at all. What had changed was Levin's own eyes, Levin's own vision. He could see the place for the first time. He woke up. Maybe you're like me. I mean, I've gone through long periods of my life, furiously productive, but with eyes half closed, half asleep, ticking items off the to-do list pretty quickly, but missing what's really going on, because I thought I had a lot of work to do. Levin has been awakened as if from a sleep. His eyes have been opened as if a man whose eyes had been closed since birth, and now he can really see what's there, and it's a kind of transfiguration. This simple story about mowing, Levin has seen for the first time something essential about what's really worth noticing and what really inspires gratitude in human life. This old man shared next to nothing. Churka, soaked bread from a tin cup. But there's a beauty in this that, a five-star restaurant, nothing Michelin has to offer, could ever possibly equal. So that's the first scene I wanted to talk about, and I hope it gives us a sense what it's like to be in real proximity to another human being, to really share a moment with another human being, to really experience fellowship. And I would like to suggest that Tolstoy wants us to take seriously the possibility that Levin has experienced a kind of rebirth. He will now see life somewhat differently than he did before this episode. So, as I said, that's a story about a man mowing grass. The next story is about a woman. A minor character in the text named Dolly. I don't think Dolly fared very well in the estimation of Oprah's book club members. But I think we will discover that there may be some redeeming features of Dolly that deserve all the attention we can give her. She looks like a minor character, doesn't appear to amount to much. doesn't live happily ever after exactly, but there's something beautiful about Dolly, or more specifically, there's something remarkable about Dolly's capacity to see what's truly beautiful in human life. And this, of course, is a Van Gogh image. To tell you about Dolly, I have to tell you about Steva. And Steva, I think, is a character who will rightly earn your ire. So Steva is the brother of the title character Anna Karenina. His wife is Dolly. And she is the father of Dolly's 5 living and 2 dead children. By the way, over the course of the novel, Dolly bears an additional child, her 8th, so now she has 6 living children. Steve is not much of a human being in many respects. Now, don't get me wrong, he's BMOC. What's that? Big man on campus. He is the life of the party. Everybody likes to be with Steva because he knows how to have a good time. And if you're in his company, you're probably having a good time. The book opens with the famous sentence, "All happy families are alike, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." And we immediately find out that the Oblonsky household, the household of Steva and Dolly, is in an uproar. Why? Dolly has found out about her husband's affair with the children's French governess and has told Steva, Steve, by the way, we could call him Steve, has told Steve that she cannot go on living in the same house with him. This is how the novel opens. Marital infidelity, discovery of infidelity, and a kind of chaos in a household as a result. This is Steva. This is a cautionary tale. Beware if you find yourself thinking like Steva. She will never forgive me, he thinks about his wife Dolly. And what is more horrible is that it is all my fault. Yet I am not to blame. Does that make sense to you? This is somebody who doesn't take responsibility for his actions. This is the tragedy. It's all my fault, yet I am not to blame. How could he be not to blame? He's the one who had the affair with the French governess. How could he possibly be not to blame? Well, he persuaded himself that he was incapable of thinking that he repented of his deed. He, a handsome man of 34, was not in love with his wife, who was a year younger than he. He repented only that he had not done a better job of concealing this fact from his wife. This Steva might even be a kind of despicable character. To be sure, he's the life of the party, but he doesn't accept responsibility of what he's done, and his only regret is that he didn't conceal the affair as well as he should have from his wife. From his point of view, anybody ever been to Vegas? That town out west, Las Vegas? What do they say about Vegas? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You know, Steva wants to spend his life in Vegas. You know, to have a wife and children at home and, a happy, harmonious household, but also to lead the life of a red-blooded, virile, testosterone-powered bachelor of 34, a man at the peak of his health. Why shouldn't both those avenues be open to him? Who would possibly want to close both those pathways from this delightful man, the life of the party? Instead of taking offense, this is when Dolly has the letter in her hand. He comes in with his usual, savoir-faire, and there's Dolly, tear-stained, letter in hand, the letter to the French governess. Instead of taking offense, disavowing it, begging forgiveness, his face, quite involuntarily, the reflexes of the brain, he thought, suddenly broke out into his usual good-natured smile. This is how Steve gets out of everything, with his usual good-natured smile. But is it going to get him out of this predicament? It seemed to him that she, a worn-out, aging, no longer beautiful woman who was in no way remarkable, the simple, merely good-natured mother of his family, ought to have indulged him simply out of a sense of fairness. By the way, I'm not telling you this because I want you to get to know Steva. I'm telling you this because I want you to get to know Dolly. Dolly is a named character who in many respects is on par with the unnamed old man with whom Levin mows. Maybe we need fewer Dollys in the world and more French governesses. But what if in fact what we need is more Dollys? What if the Dollys are in a sense the bearers of the flame? If they're the ones who keep the human light lit, so to speak, and if through Dolly, and in particular the eyes of Dolly, we might see some things that otherwise tend to escape our notice. So Steva, nonetheless, he was sensible of the full gravity of the situation and felt sorry for his wife, his children, and himself. You know, this is a sad situation. You feel sorry for people in sad situations, right? So he resolves, I just have to lose myself in the demands of the day. Off I go to work. He picked up his hat and stopped to think whether he was forgetting anything. It turned out that he'd forgotten nothing except the one thing he would have liked to have forgotten, his wife. Again, I didn't tell you about Steva because Steva is worth our attention. I told you about Steva so you could understand Dolly and why she so merits our attention. Again, Tolstoy doesn't hit us over the head. There's no thunderclap. The lights don't suddenly come on in a darkened room. The deep, deep lessons are hidden, buried in the text, in what appears to be utterly unremarkable observations about common human events. But now we turn to Dolly. She says to her husband, can we go on living together? Tell me, is that possible? After my husband, the father of my children, has taken his own children's governess as his mistress? How could we possibly live together as man and wife, mother and father, after this incident? So Dolly, I think to a lot of 21st century perspectives, Dolly is exploited. The female equivalent of cuckolded is cuckweened. Dolly is cuckweened. She perhaps deserves to be despised. Why? Because she stays with her husband. How did Oprah's book club read that? Dolly's a doormat. She lets her husband walk all over her. Shame on Dolly. Dolly, the doormat. We should all despise Dolly and rejoice in the fact that our daughters and granddaughters no longer live in a world where a woman would have to put up with such an unfaithful husband. But as we'll see, Dolly adopts a somewhat different course. So we might say, well, that's just because she's trapped in a 19th century Russian patriarchy. She has no option. She has nowhere to go. She can't own property in her own name. Who's going to support her? She has no choice but to remain in that bad marriage. Maybe. But maybe not. Maybe there's something really special about this seemingly ordinary character, Dolly. So this is Dolly, and she's now got 6 children. We met her with 5. Peaceful with 6 children, Dolly could never be. One might fall ill. Another might be about to fall ill. A third needed something. A fourth exhibited signs of bad character. And so on and so forth. Rarely were there brief periods of peace. But these troubles and worries were for Dolly the sole possible happiness. Were it not for them, she would have been left alone with her thoughts of her husband who did not love her. Sounds pretty bleak, but maybe it's not quite so bleak as it seems at first glance. So one thing that I think is so important about Dolly that's not the case of Stiva, her husband, is that Dolly sees herself as part of a larger whole. We've bamboozled all contemporary students, grade school students, high school students, college students, graduate students, professional students, in my field, residents and fellows, faculty candidates. We've bamboozled all of them because we asked them to write personal statements, right? Turn in your transcript and your test scores and a personal statement, and we'll consider you for admission. People think, oh, I've got to write a personal statement. That means what? It's about me. That means every sentence begins with the word I and ends with the word me. This is all about me. Nothing could be further from the truth. What's the important question? Not what is your story. What's the important question? The essential question for every human being. It's not what is your story. It's what? Not what is your story, but what larger story are you a part of? In contrast to Stiva, Dolly knows what larger story she's a part of. And it's a story with some heartache in it, some bitter disappointment, some lingering resentment. But in a sense, it's also a beautiful story precisely because it's part of something larger. What if we can only recognize the good of the part when we see it in the context of the whole? You and I are not who we are if all we are is 10 fingers and 10 toes and 2 eyes and opposable thumbs and complex vocal apparatus and color vision and so on. 46XX or 46XY. That's not what we are. We're really only who we are. In fact, we're really only to the extent we're part of something bigger. A family, a neighborhood, I don't know, a faith tradition, a club, a nation. Who knows? But we really come into ourselves, in a sense become ourselves, only when we're part of something larger than ourselves. So Dolly, I think, is an example of somebody who's able to rejoice that she has something in her life larger to serve. And through this service, she becomes holy herself. Is there a larger whole in your life that you serve that really brings you into being fully as yourself, that you'd never really be yourself except for the chance you have to serve that larger whole? I would suggest one such whole is your relationship with a child, one of your children, if you have one. That makes us part of a family. And one of our best chances in life to come fully into our own is the fact that we have families. We're not just engaged in a struggle to survive, to keep the human species going. We are enjoying an opportunity to become fully human by virtue of being members of families, as sons or daughters, brothers or sisters, fathers or mothers, and so on. That story gets told in strictly biological terms, survive and reproduce. But Tolstoy reminds us there's a much deeper and more beautiful story there, namely the chance to become fully what we are, but because we're part of a family. This is about Dolly again, but in addition, however hard it might be for a mother to bear the fear of illnesses, the illnesses themselves, and the grief at the sight of signs of bad tendencies in her children, the children themselves were even now repaying her sorrows with small joys. Have your sorrows ever been repaid with small joys? These joys were so small they passed unnoticed, like gold in sand, little teeny nuggets of gold mixed in with sand, almost imperceptible. And in bad moments, she saw only the sorrows, only the sand. But there were good moments too, when she saw only the joys, only the gold. Leo Tolstoy wrote to a friend that truth and joy are obtained how? Not by adding things to them. It's like gold. You don't obtain gold by adding things to it. You obtain gold by burning away everything that isn't gold. Where is the gold? How much is the gold hidden from us because all of the sand we've poured around it and layered on top of it? To what degree is that gold hidden to us? To what degree might we, by paying better attention, begin to see that gold again? Maybe reveal it, not just to ourselves, but one another. And how might that enrich our lives? So I think one thing Dolly, at least at her best, shows us is the opportunity to savor every opportunity for rejoicing. What if it were a mistake, a bad thing? Some might say a sin. What if it were a sin somehow to forego, to overlook, to relinquish, to cast aside an opportunity to rejoice? What if those moments should be recognized for what they are and savored to the fullest extent possible? Dolly shows us what that might look like in raising her children, in being their mother. Motherhood, so what? I mean, there are a lot of mothers in this room. Zionsville's full of mothers. Indianapolis is full of mothers. Mothers, so what? What could be more ordinary than mothers? Why should we pay attention to mothers? Of course there are mothers. There wouldn't be any human beings if there weren't mothers. But motherhood is so ordinary, so mundane. What in it could possibly deserve our attention? Could it contain any gold that we tend to overlook? I think Tolstoy thinks the answer is yes. That in fact, motherhood, mothering, being a mother might be one of the best opportunities available to human beings to actually glimpse the gold, to see what's best about human beings, the very best possibilities in human life, to seek out the gold, or at least have our eyes opened, our minds and hearts prepared, that when it flashes before us, we can at least pay attention long enough to see it for what it is. Remember Moses and the burning bush? He was the one who lingered long enough to see that though the bush was burning, it wasn't being consumed. How many dozens, hundreds of thousands of people walked by that path and didn't look long enough to notice? But Moses was patient, he was present, and he saw something the rest of us missed? What if that's present not just once in human history in a bush that doesn't burn? What if that's present every day all around us in what, for a lack of a better term, all call motherhood? What if there's an opportunity to learn that truth, like gold, is obtained not by adding to it, but by washing away all that is not gold? I'm not going to allow this to preoccupy me, to consume my full field of view, because if it does, it's going to block the gold from me. I'm just not going to let that happen, because there's something behind it that really deserves my attention. You know, maybe the real challenge for us today isn't to send a person to Mars or cure cancer, or maybe even how to relieve from ourselves the burden of mortality so that we can live forever, which, by the way, the titans of Silicon Valley are pouring billions of dollars into. People like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Larry Page and Sergey Brin. I could go on. But anyway, I mean, they've concluded that, they're worth $100 billion. They must be better than most people, maybe better than everybody. And isn't it a shame that somebody that good has to die? Surely there's some way to extend human life so the very best among us don't have to die, or at least not die so soon. Maybe that's our hope too. But here's another challenge. On a Tuesday evening or a Sunday afternoon, simply to be awake and aware to what's right there before us. Say, in our own children and grandchildren, in our own mothers and grandmothers, that there's something there beckoning us, summoning us, calling forth the best in us, and most of us don't see it because we're preoccupied with other matters. I think Dolly is a character who in Anna Karenina shows us what's really worth attending to. And when we start paying attention to things like that, unbelievable opportunities for gratitude begin to open up before us. So Dolly's going to get the kids ready for Easter. She's going to take the kids. By the way, Steva's back in St. Petersburg leading the high life. But Dolly and the 6 kids are in the country to save money. Steva has money to tip the waiters in fancy restaurants, but Dolly can't get enough money to buy a winter coat for her oldest daughter. But even in these straitened circumstances, Dolly's going to take her kids to church on Easter. In her excitement, Dolly took great pains with her hair and dress. Previously, she dressed for herself in order to look handsome and please others. Later, the older she became, the more she disliked dressing. She could see how her looks had faded. But now again, she dressed herself with pleasure and excitement. Now she was dressing not for herself, not for her own beauty, but so that she, as the mother of these splendid children, would not spoil the overall impression. And taking one last look in the mirror, she was pleased with herself. She was pretty. Not as pretty as she had once wanted to be at a ball, but pretty for the purpose she now had in mind. You see, Dolly knows this isn't really about me. I'm part of a larger whole. It's actually more about each of these 6 children, my 6 children, than it is about me. But nonetheless, I have a responsibility to look good. Don't spoil the impression that these 6 children make. It's not my debutante ball. It's taking my 6 children to Easter service. Which one is the more life-defining moment? Which one offers the greatest opportunity for fulfillment? Which one is more worthy of gratitude? I think the suggestion here is that dressing to take the 6 children to Easter service offers far more to be grateful for than her debutante ball, when she was, in a sense, at her prettiest. But I'm not the main object of attention. It's these children who wouldn't be here except for something that passed through me. And what a pleasure to get to share that with other people at the service. So Steva never really sees the family of which he is a part. When he goes out the front door, he's a virile, hot-blooded man on the make. You know? Looking for opportunities that an encounter with an attractive woman might present. Dolly never forgets for a second in any context that she is the mother of those 6 children. There's no partition. There's no silos. You know, in Dolly's life, she always is who she is in any context. And there's something beautiful about that. You know, Steva wants to go to Vegas because he knows what happens there will stay there. Dolly has no desire to go to Vegas. Her home is her home. That's where she's meant to be. That's where she becomes the best version of herself by being the best mother she can to those 6 children. Will she ever win an award? No. Will she ever get rich? No. Will she ever be able to fire and hire people at will? No. But in answering the call of motherhood, she will become the best version of a human being. So she sees herself through her family, and she sees that her beauty as a belle pales next to her beauty as the mother of these children. Suppose you had to have your picture taken. Single photograph best represent you, what your life has been. Right? If you're a photographer, you frame things. What goes in that frame? Would it just be you? You know, with your hunting rifle or your knitting needles or, you know, your wall full of trophies? Is that what belongs in that photograph? I'm not sure what Steva would put in the photograph. Probably something he thought would get him, you know, at least in the pages, if not on the cover of a magazine like GQ. But Dolly, for sure, would want to be pictured with her 6 children. Because, in a sense, that's who she is. That's what her life means. And her life, in the end, means a great deal more than I think her husband's does. There was no one in the church except peasants, servants, and their women. But Dolly saw, or imagines she saw, the admiration she and her children inspired. The children were not only handsome in their elegant outfits, but also sweet because they behaved so well. Alyosha, true, did not stand entirely well. He kept turning around and trying to see the back of his jacket. How cute, you know? Is that misbehavior? No, that's beautiful. He's trying to see the back of his jacket. He was unusually sweet precisely because that could be regarded as a kind of misbehavior. Tanya stood like the big sister she was and watched over the little ones. But the youngest, Lily, was enchanting with her naive amazement at everything. And it was hard not to smile when, after communion, she said, "Please, some more?" You know, can the English language capture anything more beautiful than that? I'm not sure it can. That little girl, the youngest, "Please, some more?" By the way, where's that from? Oliver Twist, Charles Dickens. Tolstoy knew his Dickens. "Please, sir, may I have some more?" That's who we should be. Please, sir, may I have some more? May I have some more of this thing called beauty? This thing called joy? This thing called love? Please, sir, may I have some more? May I have more to feel truly grateful about? Could it be that it's our gratitude that opens up the possibility of discovering more of those very same things? I think Dolly understands this. She'll never write her magnum opus, The Meaning of Human Life. Dolly's theology, Dolly's great American novel. She's never going to write that. She doesn't amount to much. Or does she? What does it mean to amount to something? To what degree does earthly fame or power or wealth constitute what we most aspire to amount to? Or far more importantly, what we aspire for our children and grandchildren to amount to? Is wealth and fame and the power the best we can imagine for them? Or do we know somehow something far deeper and more meaningful than that? So Dolly and her children remind us what it's like to rekindle our capacity to be surprised, to wonder. Children say the darndest things. They do the darndest things. And wouldn't it be a shame if we forgot to delight in that? For everything it's worth, to savor those moments, as deeply as we possibly can. Maybe the problem isn't that we've been cheated, that too little's been shared with us. Maybe the actual problem is us. We fail to see how much has been shared with us. The problem isn't that nature or God is miserly. The problem is that we're ingrates, failing to notice the bounty that lies before us, within us, and all around us. Could it be? So Dolly, I think, reminds us what it means to love the being of another person. I don't care if you got an A or a B or a C. I don't care if you finished first or dead last. I don't care if you're the tallest kid, the fastest kid, the best looking kid. I love you simply for your being, your presence, the very fact you're here. That's more than enough summons for all the love that's in any of us. Just to savor, to really savor what's good and beautiful in those we love. The poet May Sarton says, "I'm convinced the greatest misfortune that can befall a human being is to be unable to share our gifts with those we love." That can't be right. I mean, the greatest misfortune that can befall a human being is to be fired, demoted, not have enough money, to be at the bottom of a totem pole, to be nameless and unrecognized by anybody, maybe. But the poet May Sarton says the greatest misfortune is to be unable to share our gifts with those we love. Can you think of anybody who knows what it means to share her gifts with those she loves? Simple answer, Dolly. You want to see what it means to lead a rich and good human life? Study Dolly, a character who was basically entirely overlooked by Oprah's book club. Because Dolly's a doormat. She lets this guy walk all over her. Shame on Dolly. So maybe the real challenge for us isn't to get what's good and beautiful, but rather to savor what is good and beautiful in those we love. All went well at home, too, but at lunch, Grisha began whistling. And what was worse, he would not obey the English governess and was sent away without his dessert pie. Now, you would say, this is nothing. A kid gets sent away from dinner without his dessert pie? Don't waste my time. You know, how many electoral votes did Trump get? What is Jeff Bezos' net worth on this day in history? You know, how are those Indiana Hoosiers football players going to do this weekend? Tell me about important stuff. What do I care if a little kid gets sent away from dinner without his dessert pie? What could be more boring than that? Well, all I can say is, behold. Had she been there, Dolly would not have gone so far as punishment on such a day. However, she had to support the Englishwoman's authority, and she upheld her decision that Grisha was to have no dessert pie. Grisha cried, saying that Nikolinka had whistled too, but he had not been punished, and that he wasn't crying over the pie. He didn't care about the pie, but because they'd been unfair. This little boy has a powerful sense of injustice. Why am I being punished when my brother gets to have his dessert? He whistled too. That's not fair. This was too sad, and Dolly decided to forgive him. But there, as she was passing through the drawing room, she saw a scene that filled her with such joy that tears came to her eyes. Let's see if this scene will fill you with joy. This is kind of a human litmus test here. We'll find out how human each of us is in this homely, rustic, completely unremarkable little domestic scene that'll never get any coverage by even local news media, let alone national or international media. So Dolly is teaching us that there's more to life than meets the eye, that it's often better to forgive than to make sure justice is done. What was the epigraph of Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina? Anybody remember? Vengeance is mine, I will repay. Except maybe it says something like vindication is mine, which could just as easily mean I will forgive. That's not your job. That's my job. Maybe Dolly's mission here is not to ensure that justice is done, but to be an agent of forgiveness and love. Maybe that's the real human genius, you know? Not to be the policeman or the judge or the jailer of this little boy, but to forgive and love him. Maybe there's nothing more natural to us than to forgive and to love. That doesn't mean we do it easily or all the time, but maybe that's finally what's most natural to us. The punished boy was sitting in the drawing room at a corner window, and next to him stood Tanya, his bigger sister, with a plate. Under the pretext of wishing to feed her dolls, she had asked the governess for permission to bring her portion of pie to the nursery, and instead had brought it to her brother. She said, "Hey, can I have some pie to take to my dolls?" Deception. Subterfuge. Is it the Garden of Eden all over again? You know? Original sin rearing its ugly head yet again? While continuing to cry over the unfairness of the punishment he had suffered, Grisha ate the pie brought to him, and through his sobs kept saying, "You eat some. Let's eat it together." Together. Eating together? Think of a word for that. Yeah, maybe communion, sharing a meal. Would Tolstoy do that? 2 little kids with dessert pie? Is that our best vision in this greatest of all novels of what it means to eat together? Maybe it is. Tanya, the older sister, had been moved first by pity for Grisha, then by an awareness of her own good deed, and she too had tears in her eyes, but she did not refuse and ate her share. will you be there to eat your share? You know? What would that mean to be there when the call comes to eat our share? Well, it turns out Tanya is there, hears the call, and responds to it. A child. Wow. So I think we're seeing something like the divine spark in these little human beings whose concerns seem to be so trivial that they hardly merit notice. To be reminded that God is asking something of us in each encounter. I mean, that's a heavy burden to bear. But suppose it's true. Every time you're encountering another human being, something is being asked of you. What is God asking of you in that encounter? And above all, to recognize that we've been blessed with far more than we could ever possibly deserve. I don't think that's how most of us go through life. I've been cheated. You know, I've been ripped off. I've been exploited. I didn't get what I deserved. You know, shake my fist at Mother Nature or the fates or God. Why didn't I get what I deserved? Could it in fact be the case that each of us has been blessed with far more than we could possibly deserve? When they saw their mother, Grisha and Tanya became frightened. But when they looked at her face, they realized that they were doing a good thing. And they began laughing, and with mouths full of pie, started wiping their smiling lips and smearing their beaming faces with tears and jam. My goodness, your new white dress. Tanya, Grisha, said their mother, trying to rescue the dress, but she had tears in her eyes and was smiling a blissful, ecstatic smile. Nothing. Trivia. Rustic, homely, nothing newsworthy here. This just doesn't count in the great scheme of things. Or does it? Could it in fact be that many of the things we think count for the most in fact count for very little, and some of the things that actually count the most can't even be counted? And this little domestic encounter between two siblings is one of the best examples of that in world literature. The sister cared for her brother in his sorrow and indignation. When she brought him a gift, he asked her to share it with him, right? Let's eat together. And when their mother saw them and they saw their mother, they thought, uh-oh, we're in trouble. But that wasn't the case at all. Because what? Not because all of a sudden a copy of Immanuel Kant's Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals, or John Stuart Mill's Utilitarianism, or Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, that didn't flash before their eyes. What did they see that showed them with absolute certainty that they were doing a good thing? When they looked at her face, when they looked at their mother's face, they realized they were doing a good thing. How about that for motherhood? How do these children learn what a good thing is? From their mother's face. She didn't really say anything. In fact, what she said was kind of a misdirection, right? Your new white dress, Tanya, Grisha. That's not the message here. The words coming out of her mouth. The real message here is her ecstatic, blissful smile and the tears in her eyes. Those are tears of gratitude. That's a blissful, ecstatic smile of gratitude. No money changed hands. Nobody got drafted, into the major leagues or signed a multi-million-dollar contract. It's a nothing as far as our daily awareness through social media would suggest. But maybe it's in fact the most real thing that happened in the world that day. And it goes on being the most real thing that happens in the world every day. Levin out there mowing the hay, becoming one with the work, learning from the old man what it means to savor the work, to become immersed in it, to actually discover things through the work, things you can share with others, that a kind of communion becomes possible with media as humble as a tin cup and some water stained with greenery and some ordinary bread, that could be the richest feast we could ever enjoy. That Dolly with her children, these little domestic dramas, don't amount to anything. Well, maybe they in fact amount to everything. Maybe Leo Tolstoy is showing us what it means to really live, and it turns out to really live, it means living from a posture, from a perspective of gratitude. To really rejoice in all the things we have to be truly grateful for. Maybe the genius of Anna Karenina is not a Harlequin romance about passion, adultery, self-destruction. Maybe the real message of Anna Karenina is something apparently homely, humble beyond belief, but is in fact revealing the bounty, as I said before, right in front of us, within us, and all around us, if only we have eyes to see. So, to realize that the world itself is being recreated in each moment. Creation isn't something that happened, 5,700 years ago or 13.7 billion years ago, that it's happening right here, right now, today. The world is being created, and you and I have been enlisted as co-creators. And our real mission as creators isn't to replace what's here and in the process to destroy it, but to see what's been here all along and really savor it. And to accept that by seeing and savoring the moment for what it is, we help bring creation more fully into being. That somehow our recognition of it, our savoring it, our gratitude, our celebration somehow helps to bring it more fully into being in a way that wouldn't be possible if we weren't here. I mean, to put it as simply as possible, perhaps our human mission is above all to be open to joy and gratitude when it's offered to us. Could that be? So, these are just two little scenes in a book that numbers more than 800 pages. Levin mowing and Dolly mothering. Eyes go over those words every day. And the gold remains hidden. High school students, college students, graduate students, people who have finished their formal education a long time ago. The eyes pass over the words, and it looks like it's all sand. But that little story about Moses, the one who lingered long enough to see that though the bush was burning, it wasn't consumed. Maybe that's the message to us. Can we open our eyes? Can we come fully to wakefulness so that we can see these things that so often escape our notice? So when the Bible says vindication is mine, if that's what it says, when it says perhaps not I will repay, but somehow I will do creation right, it's an opportunity to us to see what's worth savoring and rejoicing in. Maybe what's really called for in human life is not more justice, not more punishment, not more anger and alienation, but something like patience. Who among us has the patience to dwell with Tolstoy's Anna Karenina? Not just for our eyes to pass over the words, but to actually linger with it and savor it and let its full meaning come into view. Maybe if that were possible for us, we could become more forgiving and more joyful human beings. And perhaps that's what the world really needs. By the way, you can access Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina at a cost of nothing. How could that be? 800-page book available for free? How can that be? Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of English translations that went out of copyright a long time ago. You can download the whole book, a PDF, at a total cost to you of nothing. I mean, you have to have internet service and so forth. Oh, you mean it's free? Oh, then it must be worthless, right? Anything that's free is worthless, right? It's the expensive things that really count, right? Like a luxury automobile or a 10,000 square foot house with an elevator or two. That's worth paying attention to. But could it be that this great novel, maybe this greatest of great novels that's available to us at a cost of exactly nothing, is in fact one of the greatest treasures available to us in our lives? Far from being worthless, it's priceless. It's just the best thing there is if we have open eyes, open minds and hearts, and the kind of patience, the kind of presence that it takes for it to really speak to us. And my wish for you is that you would be one of those rare human beings who has the patience and the presence to let Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina speak to you, to call what's best forth from you, and to help you lead a more grateful human life. All right, I'm going to stop there. I wasn't kidding when I said 2 hours. We've gone about an hour and 35 minutes. We have as much as 2 hours. I don't mean we have to use all of it. But I'd love to see if there are some questions or comments, corrections. I probably got some things wrong. I just can't tell which ones they are. So you could help us